Think back to 2 years ago. You would have said yes to that Friday night invitation without a single second thought. If a friend texted you about hitting up a local spot, you grabbed your keys and walked out the door. But tonight, you find yourself staring at your phone, watching the group chat blow up, and drafting an excuse to cancel at the very last minute. Or maybe you actually forced yourself to go. You're standing in the middle of a crowded rooftop bar in downtown Manhattan, a busy lounge in Los Angeles, or a weekend backyard barbecue. On paper, this social interaction should be effortless. Everyone around you is laughing, clinking glasses, taking selfies, and flashing rehearsed smiles. But deep down, you've already checked out. Your mind has completely left the building. You find yourself staring at the fake expressions, noticing how people switch their personalities depending on who walks into the room. You stick around for an hour, playing your designated part and nodding along, before slipping away without saying a formal goodbye. As you drive home down the quiet highway in total silence, watching the city lights fade in your rearview mirror, a cold realization hits you. You feel infinitely more isolated, standing inside that packed room than you do right now, completely by yourself. And then, that toxic little voice slips into your consciousness. What is wrong with me? Am I losing my edge? You've probably tried to give this everyday condition a modern, clinical label. You told yourself you're just dealing with extreme corporate burnout or academic exhaustion. You wondered if it's a mental health crisis. You convince yourself that you are becoming deeply antisocial, that your career networking skills are decaying, and that this self-imposed isolation is going to lock you into a permanent psychological prison. So, you tried the standard American remedy. You force yourself back out there. You accept more shallow corporate happy hours, more LinkedIn networking events, more Tinder dates, and more crowded weekend parties. You try to drown out the internal silence by physically throwing your body into rooms packed with people. And what happens? The remedy fails completely. In fact, it makes the internal friction feel 10 times worse. You come home feeling entirely drained, frustrated, and cynical. But here's the absolute truth that you have never once considered. You are diagnosing yourself with the wrong psychological condition entirely. The core transformation, the separation of the Princeton what is happening to you right now, has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of social capacity. It has nothing to do with an inability to build corporate networks or maintain friendships. It has everything to do with your developing intolerance for a very specific structural lie. It's the foundational lie that modern society runs on. It's the shallow social script that you use to perform automatically, without ever noticing it, the fake compliments at the office water cooler, the forced laughter at bad jokes, the exhausting game of pretending to care about people's superficial drama. But now, your mind and body have evolved. You can no longer play along without your internal architecture registering that performance as a direct insult to your intelligence. You didn't lose the power to form deep, meaningful connections. You simply lost the tolerance to pretend that a superficial transactional performance is the same thing as genuine human execution. Those are two completely different losses. Centuries ago, the legendary political strategist Niccolò Machiavelli spent his entire life analyzing the interior mechanics of individuals who operated at the highest levels of human statecraft and society. He looked directly at the people who felt profoundly detached from the masses around them. What Niccolò Machiavelli realized with absolute consistency was that the individuals who possessed true potential for power were never isolated because they lacked options. They weren't lonely outcasts sitting in basements. They were surrounded by options. They had extensive networks, crowded courts, Endless invitations and people constantly trying to gain their favor or use them for leverage. What they lacked was something far more precise and exceptionally rare: strategic alignment. The most brutal part of this psychological evolution is that modern American culture gives you absolutely no language to describe it. In a hyper-connected society built on Instagram metrics, TikTok engagement, and superficial popularity, you cannot tell the people around you that you feel entirely detached when your social calendar looks completely full from the outside. Niccolò Machiavelli identified a reality of human nature that mainstream, feel-good self-help psychology completely glosses over. It isn't isolation based on an absence of people. It is a calculated detachment born from the heavy presence of superficial people. It's the suffocating weight of being surrounded by co-workers who talk behind each other's backs the second someone leaves the office. It's the exhaustion of engaging in transactional small talk that burns up your valuable hours without offering a single ounce of strategic depth. It's the vertigo of living in a modern social landscape built entirely on fragile appearances, while your mind has already peeked behind the curtain to observe the raw, calculating mechanics of human nature underneath. You are not antisocial. You have simply woken up to a reality that the vast majority of the population spends their entire lives desperately trying to avoid. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that the masses are always satisfied by appearance and illusion. You, however, have grown a hunger for real strategic leverage. Everyday manifestations, the battleground of daily life. Let's look at how this plays out in your immediate, everyday life. Think about your workplace or your college campus. You sit in team meetings where people spend 45 minutes talking in corporate buzzwords, saying absolutely nothing of substance, just to make themselves look important to the boss. The old you would have jumped into the mix, fighting for validation, trying desperately to be noticed. But the developing Machiavellian mind inside you sits back. You watch the room. You notice who is sucking up, who is shifting blame, and who is quietly threatened by your silence. Suddenly, your co-workers notice your detachment. They start asking, "Hey, are you okay? You're being really quiet today." What they are actually saying is, "Your silence makes it impossible for me to read your agenda." And that terrifies me. Think about your modern relationships and dating life. You go out with people who spend the entire dinner checking their notifications, talking about their follow count, or fishing for compliments. They want an emotional echo chamber. They want an accessory, not a partner. When you refuse to provide that cheap validation, when you don't instantly jump to comfort their fragile egos, they label you as distant or hard to read. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that when you stop feeding people's emotional dependencies, you automatically take control of the dynamic. By withdrawing your immediate emotional availability from everyday interactions, you switch from being a predictable participant to becoming the psychological anchor of the environment. Even inside family dynamics, this shift is incredibly disruptive. At holiday dinners or family gatherings, you no longer get sucked into the petty, repetitive arguments about politics or old family grievances. You observe the behavioral loops. You see the manipulation tactics being used by relatives to trigger guilt or force compliance. Because you choose to remain emotionally unshakable, their weapons slide right off you. You have effectively stepped off their chessboard. The strategic protocols, cultivating unreadable leverage. When this psychological shift first occurs, it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like a massive loss. It feels like you're losing your grip on your friends, your social status, and the world you built. But Niccolò Machiavelli teaches us across the pages of history that this exact shift is the definitive line in the sand that separates the rulers from the ruled. to turn this internal evolution into absolute real-world leverage in your career, finances, and relationships. You must understand and execute 3 critical Machiavellian protocols. Protocol 1, the principle of strategic scarcity. Niccolò Machiavelli famously wrote that an operator who is constantly seen, always available, and instantly responsive completely diminishes their internal value. The crowd takes constant presence for granted. If you are the person who replies to every text within 3 seconds, who shows up to every single happy hour, and who is always available to listen to someone complain for hours, you have commoditized your time. When you begin pulling back your presence, you are not retreating out of weakness or depression. You are intentionally creating strategic scarcity. By making yourself exceptionally difficult to access, you force your everyday environment to reevaluate your worth. Let the masses exhaust themselves fighting for cheap attention in crowded rooms and spamming group chats. Your presence is a premium asset, and it must be guarded with absolute iron discipline. Protocol 2. The art of the unreadable. The masses are entirely governed by their immediate impulses, petty frustrations, and emotional reactions. In the modern world, people wear their insecurities, their desperate need for validation, and their anger right on their sleeves. They post their entire emotional lives on social media for the world to see. A true Machiavellian strategist operates with total emotional detachment. When you sit in an office meeting full of noise, office politics, and hidden agendas, and you maintain your quiet gravity, you become a human mirror. Because you aren't feeding the room with reactive words or defensive arguments, people will automatically project their own deepest insecurities onto your silence. They will call you intimidating, distant, or cold. Let them. An unreadable operator who observes everything while revealing absolutely nothing about their next move is far too dangerous and expensive for anyone to casually cross. Protocol 3. The weaponization of total independence. Most people in modern society are psychological hostages to the opinions of their social circles and corporate environments. They modify their behavior, censor their true thoughts, and chase ridiculous trends just to avoid the terrifying sting of social exclusion. The moment you master the ability to stand entirely alone in a room, to spend a weekend working on your goals without needing a single text message or nod of approval, you strip the crowd of its ultimate leverage over you. You can no longer be blackmailed with isolation because you have already chosen solitude as your natural high-performance habitat. You become immune to their social penalties. The sovereign awakening, the power of need-free manipulation. This deep internal pressure, this friction you've been feeling when trying to fit into standard social circles, had to build up within you before something genuinely honest, calculated, and unshakable could emerge. You were not shrinking, breaking down, or withdrawing from the world over these past 2 years. You were clarifying your target, and strategic clarification, when it finally clicks into place, looks absolutely nothing like what you originally expected. It doesn't arrive with a loud, dramatic, emotional breakthrough. It doesn't feel like a Hollywood resolution. It feels like a cold, quiet readiness. What this new chapter of your life demands of you right now is absolute precision. It doesn't require a new social strategy, a better networking technique, or a superficial commitment to forced vulnerability. It requires one foundational shift. Stop treating your capacity for solitude as evidence of psychological damage, and start treating it as the iron sovereign territory from which absolute power becomes possible. The individual who can exist completely alone, the one who can sit comfortably in their apartment with the phone turned off, facing the full weight of their own separate existence, and not shatter into anxiety, is the exact same individual who can navigate human society without needing anything from anyone. That is what Niccolò Machiavelli meant by absolute self-mastery. It is not a life completely devoid of human relationships. It is a life where your relationships are governed by cold, deliberate strategy, rather than desperate psychological need. It is interaction completely free from the weakness of dependency. When you don't need their approval, you can read their motives clearly. When you don't need their applause, you can see their next move miles before it happens. You are not broken. You are not losing your edge. You are not losing your ability to navigate the world. You have simply arrived at the precise coordinates where true, unshakable leverage becomes possible for the very first time in your life, because you have completely stopped being willing to accept a cheap, superficial social performance. Now choose the arena. This is where the definitive line in the sand is drawn for your future. The old, compliant, approval-seeking version of you, the one that felt guilty for wanting to be left alone, is officially a massive operational liability to your peace of mind, your financial growth, and your long-term execution. The bridge behind you has already been burned to ash. There is absolutely no turning back to the cozy safety of your psychological cage or your old superficial friendships. The illusions of social comfort, fairness, and universal approval are dead. If this strategic breakdown has upgraded your internal architecture today, anchor these insights into your mind immediately. Do not let this premium clarity dissolve back into the mindless noise of ordinary life the second you close this app. Demonstrate your strategic intent right now. Smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, and align yourself with our inner circle of advanced psychological architects who refuse to live as passive passengers of fate. Before you step back out into the hyper-competitive arena of the modern world, drop "I'm observant" in the comments section below, and mean it with every single fiber of your sovereign being. Mark this exact moment as the day you stopped playing their game. Let the crowd carry on with their exhausting social masks, their emotional theater, and their desperate pursuit of superficial attention. Your objective is entirely different. Command your mind, secure your borders, stay observant, stay calculated, move in absolute silence,